Zbigniew Brzezinski, an extremely influential American geopolitical strategist for decades in United States foreign policy, once made it very clear that Americans should not allow Eurasian forces to unite too much. That wasn't difficult during the Cold War. The rivalry between the main players in the region prevented any strategic level rapprochement for a long time. That was true even when there were hardly any wars between them. This American way of thinking allowed the United States, being extremely pragmatic, to circumvent and manipulate regional rivalries for their own benefit, always applying precise pressure on the fringes of Heinland, that peripheral region of Eurasia. After the Cold War, the United States abandoned realism and pragmatism to pursue ideological supremacy. And just like sand, when you hold it in your hands, it slips through your fingers if you squeeze it too tightly. And that's what happened in geopolitics. The extreme pressure from the United States ended up uniting anti-rival countries, some in inconvenient alliances, all just focusing on a bigger enemy, the United States itself and NATO. But others seem to be moving toward levels of partnership of strategic depth and not just convenience. Among them, Russia and Iran stand out. But what is the potential of Russo-Persian relations and how are they working today? That's what we're going to see in this video. Before that, remember to subscribe and share the video with everyone to help the Geopolitics Mundial channel keep growing, and follow us on Instagram and Telegram to stay up to date with the channel's news and with geopolitics news in general. Now, I often make short comments on Instagram about the situation in world geopolitics, so follow me there to stay updated on that. I'm Adriano Peita and this is World Geopolitics. The relations between Russia and Iran are very old and very complex, marked by periods of cooperation as well as moments of distrust and competition. So, the first thing I need to make very clear is that it's the ideological affinity between both countries that is bringing them together. It is increasingly based on opposition to the United States and the Western-led world order. The relationship between Moscow and Tehran has always had a highly transactional character. The Soviet Union was the first country to recognize the Islamic Republic of Iran after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. However, this diplomatic gesture did not stop Moscow from supporting Iraq militarily during the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq war by selling weapons and aiding Saddam Hussein. This Soviet stance led Iran to adopt a strategy of neither East nor West, focusing on military and economic self-sufficiency throughout much of the 1980s. After all, for the Ayatollahs, their struggle was on two fronts, against the Christian infidels of the West, but also against the atheist infidels of the socialist bloc. But with the end of the Iran-Iraq war, Tehran began to reassess its stance toward the Soviet Union. From 1989 to 1991, it signed several military agreements to acquire MiG-29 and Su-24 jets and set up licensed production of tanks and armored vehicles. These agreements marked the beginning of a much more structured military cooperation, which expanded and deepened even further after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. During the 1990s, Russia was one of the main suppliers of weapons to Iran, especially in the first half of the decade. However, the relationship suffered a major setback in 1995 when the then Russian Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin, signed a secret agreement with the Vice President of the United States, Al Gore. The agreement required Russia to stop signing new arms deals with Iran and end current contracts by the end of 1999 in exchange for the support of the United States for Russia's entry into the Wassenaar Arrangement, an international arms export control regime. In addition, Russia joined the Missile Technology Control Regime, which imposed new restrictions on the supply of missile technology to Iran. And although Moscow continued to support Iran's missile program in indirect ways, these restrictions were viewed with displeasure by Tehran. Despite these limitations in the military sector, Russia maintained its cooperation with Iran in the nuclear field. In 1995, the two countries signed an agreement for the construction of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, with an addendum signed in 1998. It suffered delays but was completed in 2009, began operating in 2010, and was connected to Iran's power grid in 2011. A turning point in the relationship between the two countries came with the rise of Vladimir Putin to power in 2000, marking a new chapter in the relationship between Moscow and Tehran. Putin quickly cancelled that previous agreement between the United States and Russia, re-establishing the supply of weapons to Iran. And in 2001, both countries signed a treaty on the foundations of relations and principles of cooperation, as well as a specific agreement on military training. During that decade, Russia supplied Iran with air defense systems and collaborated on space technology and missile development programs. However, the relationship would once again face turbulence during the administration of Dmitry Medvedev. That's because in 2010, under pressure from the United States and the United Nations, Medvedev signed a decree prohibiting the delivery of advanced S-300 air defense missiles to Iran, as well as other conventional weapons. Then Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad strongly criticized the decision, accusing Russia of yielding to Western pressure. With Putin's return to the presidency in 2012, the relationship between Russia and Iran was revitalized once again. Putin sought to get closer to Tehran, recognizing Iran as a historic partner. In 2015, a remarkable event marked this new phase. Quds Force Commander General Qasem Soleimani of Iran's Revolutionary Guard went to Moscow to gain Russian backing for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to stay in power. This was another reason for Russia's 2015 military intervention in Syria, strengthening the strategic alliance between Moscow and Tehran. Officially, Russia justified its entry into the war as part of the effort to fight the Islamic State, but in practice, it also prevented the country from falling into the hands of Iran. It also played a crucial role in the conflict by deploying troops and aiding allied militias. But the peak of this relationship would come with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, taking the relationship between the two countries to an unprecedented level. Faced with Western sanctions, Russia began to rely more on Iran for military supplies, especially drones. These drones, like the Shahed 136, were widely used by the Russians on the Ukrainian battlefield. This provided Tehran with a unique opportunity to test its technology against Western air defense systems. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, who took office in 2021, identified the relationship with Russia as a strategic priority. In January 2022, he went to Moscow to propose a 20-year cooperation agreement, later signed by his successor, Masoud Peshchian. January 2025, the deepening of their partnership is also reflected in the diplomatic sphere. Russia has consistently used its position on the United Nations Security Council to support Iran and its allies in the Middle East, frequently condemning Israeli actions against pro-Iran groups such as Hezbollah and the Houthi militias in Yemen. Furthermore, there are reports that Moscow is considering supplying weapons to the Houthis, signaling an even greater expansion of this military cooperation between Russia and Iran. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the relationship between the two countries is complex, sustained by a mutual commitment to challenge and protect, which has increased the need for mutual collaboration in various sectors. The partnership between Russia and Iran is structured around 7 main pillars: transfer of weaponry, support for the industrial and defense base, technological cooperation, and knowledge transfer, military exercises, economic cooperation, political and diplomatic cooperation, and media cooperation. Since the beginning of the Ukraine war, Iran has been one of the main suppliers of drones, short-range ballistic missiles, and other weaponry to Moscow. In return, Iran has received Yak-130 training fighter jets from Moscow, Western technologies captured on the battlefield in Ukraine, and support for its network of allies in the Middle East. The supply of Iranian drones to Russia has had a major impact on the battlefield. Since August 2022, Iran has been regularly sending Shahid-1 36 drones as well as improved versions like the Shahid-238 and Shahid-107. Reports indicate that Russia has already used more than 8,000 Iranian drones in attacks against Ukrainian infrastructure and military forces. The advantage of these drones lies in their cost effectiveness. The Shahid-136 itself costs between $20,000 and $50,000 to produce. But Iran sold them to Russia for $193,000 per unit, which generated an estimated revenue of more than $1.1 billion. To have Iran, this trade strengthened the Iranian defense industry and positions Iran as an important arms exporter to other interested countries as well. Iran also supplied Russia with a very large number of short-range ballistic missiles, including the Fatah 360, Fatah 110 and Zulfagar models, whose range varies between 120 and 300 kilometers. And although these missiles do not offer significant operational advantages over the Russian systems that already exist, their acquisition allowed Russia to save its long-range missile stockpiles and maintain a continuous campaign of attacks against Ukraine. In addition to drones and missiles, Iran sent a large quantity of ammunition, artillery shells and tanks to Russia using commercial routes in the Caspian Sea to avoid sanctions. The current estimate from intelligence agencies is that Tehran has sent 300,000 artillery shells and more than 1 million rifle rounds to the Russians. Russia has the capacity to produce all of this on an even larger scale. But this partnership with Iran, just like it did with North Korea, allowed them to use much more of this ammunition without having to deplete their own stockpiles. The war in Ukraine has imposed severe restrictions on the Russian military industry, forcing Moscow to seek alternatives for critical supplies. Iran emerged as an essential partner in this context, providing not only weapons but also key parts and electronic components for the production of Russian drones and missiles. In addition, Iran has used Western technology captured by the Russians on the battlefield for reverse engineering, refining its own defense systems. This exchange benefits both countries. Russia gets short-term war supplies, while Iran improves its technological and industrial base in the long run. The Russians and the Iranians have greatly expanded their cooperation in military and cyber technology since 2022. Moscow has provided Tehran with access to cyber, air defense, advanced systems, and intelligence on military operations, while Iran has shared its expertise in drone use and asymmetric warfare. And there are also indications that the two countries are collaborating on the development of artificial intelligence applied to electronic warfare. This will allow both to improve their attack and defense capabilities against Western systems. Since 2022, Russia and Iran have also intensified their joint operations, conducting military exercises in the Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and Central Asia. These maneuvers not only strengthen joint operations between these two armed forces, but also serve as a show of force to the West. And Tehran has sent military personnel to occupied Crimea, where they trained Russian operators in the use of Iranian drones, further consolidating the military partnership. As I mentioned, with both countries under heavy sanctions, finding ways to keep their economies running has been important. In the commercial sector, both countries have increased bilateral trade, focusing on energy, commodities, and defense technology. Moscow and Tehran have been working to create alternative payment systems, reducing their dependence on the dollar and the Western financial system. Iran has also benefited economically by selling weapons to Russia, offsetting some of the difficulties caused by international sanctions. And in the political arena, at the United Nations Security Council, Moscow has defended Iran, calling for new sanctions and punitive measures against the Iranian regime. In addition, the two countries have coordinated their positions in forums such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, seeking to create an alternative bloc to the Western-led international order. Russia has also given diplomatic support to Iran's allies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and other paramilitary groups in Syria and Iraq. It is very likely that the relationship between Russia and Iran has evolved from an opportunistic partnership to a deeper long-term strategic alliance. That's due to the war in Ukraine, which has solidified this relationship and made it crucial for both countries. The partnership's future depends on how the war develops. And in this sense, we have two opposing sides on this issue. The first group, in favor of maintaining unconditional support for Ukraine, believes that if Russia succeeds in the war, cooperation between Moscow and Tehran will become even stronger, allowing both to consolidate a kind of anti-Western axis. And the second group, which wants to stop supporting the Ukrainians and negotiate with Russia, believes that if the United States eases the pressure on Russia, the relationship between Tehran and Moscow will no longer be so vital. And it could stagnate, since their relationship exists precisely because of the pressure from the United States. Technological cooperation between Russia and Iran is increasing and remains a key part of their strategic alliance. This improves their military capabilities, strengthens defense industries, and expands knowledge in areas like electronic warfare, space technology, surveillance, and nuclear energy. This mutual transfer of knowledge has been fundamental for Iran to advance its military and technological programs. Meanwhile, Russia has gained from Iranian logistical and military support in the Ukraine war. The electronic warfare cooperation between the two has also intensified, with Russia assisting Iran in improving its ability to interfere with satellite navigation signals, such as Global Positioning System. Russian experience in the use of global navigation satellite system signal jamming and spoofing techniques acquired in previous conflicts, such as the war in Syria and the 2014 invasion of Ukraine, has been passed on to Iran. This has allowed the Iranians to use similar tactics to disrupt commercial air traffic in the Middle East. Russia has also been an essential partner in the development of the Iranian space program, providing assistance in building and launching satellites, allowing Iran to expand its monitoring and reconnaissance capabilities. In 2022, Russia launched the Kayan remote sensing satellite for Iran, which greatly improved Iran's ability to track military assets of the United States and its allies in the Middle East. In the following years, other satellites such as Pars-1 Kulsar and Hud were launched with the help of the Russians. Furthermore, the Russian Space Agency signed an agreement with the Iranian Space Agency to expand space cooperation, including the joint construction of new satellites. This partnership is viewed with concern by the West, since satellite launch technology can be adapted for the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, potentially nuclear. In addition, the two have intensified the integration of their financial systems by connecting Iranian banks to the Russian MIR payment system, and allowing direct transactions in rubles and rials, which is the currency of Iran, without the need to use the dollar. Another measure discussed between the two countries is the use of cryptocurrencies to facilitate trade and avoid transaction tracking by Western agencies. In the energy sector, Russia and Iran have also been seeking to strengthen their cooperation to ensure mutual energy security. Russia signed a $40 billion agreement with the National Iranian Oil Company for investments in oil fields, energy exchanges, and the construction of new pipelines. In addition, Moscow made a commitment to supply Iran with 300 million cubic meters of gas per day, helping Tehran deal with its growing energy crisis. Yes, ironically, Iran has been having energy problems in recent years. Even though they have vast gas reserves, they have been struggling to meet their domestic demand due to a lack of adequate infrastructure, which has generally been undermined because of the sanctions. What makes the energy partnership with Russia seen as essential to avoid a collapse in Iranian industry and society? But the most important agreement that went unnoticed by E was the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement, signed on January 17, 2025, formalizing cooperation between the two, including defense, intelligence sharing, the use and development of nuclear energy, the construction of the North-South International Transport Corridor, economy, and social relations. This 2025 agreement largely reflects the structure and language of the agreement signed back in 2001, but unlike the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement signed between Russia and North Korea on June 19, 2024, the 2025 Russia-Iran Treaty does not include a mutual defense clause. This distinction was highlighted by the Iranian ambassador in Moscow, Kazem Jalali, who stated on January 16, 2025 that Iran is not interested in joining any military bloc. The absence of a collective defense commitment reflects the strategic interests of both countries. Russia does not want to get directly involved in the various Middle Eastern conflicts involving Iran, and Tehran does not want to commit to a direct conflict in Europe, which, to me, signals that both sides want to keep windows open for unilateral negotiations with the West. For Iran, the agreement with Russia lays the groundwork for recovery, sustained economy, and industrial growth as long as its implementation goes as planned. For Moscow, formalizing the partnership guarantees the continuation of Iranian military support for its campaign in Ukraine. But, more importantly, the agreement creates a 20-year cooperation framework, which will allow the two countries to challenge the West in a more coordinated way. Although there are historical and ideological points of friction between the two, such as the Kremlin's emphasis on Russian ultranationalism and strengthening the Orthodox Church, which conflicts with the Iranian Shiite theocracy. Despite these differences, the partnership has grown stronger since 2022. An example of this pragmatism occurred in August 2024 when the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared support for the Zangezur corridor, a route that would connect Azerbaijan to its autonomous region of Nakhichevan. Iran has historically opposed this initiative as it would cut off its land access to Russia and Europe through Armenia. More than ever, the two countries share an aligned ideological vision, seeing their cooperation as an essential tool to challenge and weaken the international order established by the West. And also, in the long term, the alliance between the two is a way to counter excessive Chinese influence in the Eurasian region. Russia needs Iran to maintain its military campaign in Ukraine, both through the supply of Iranian weapons and through Iranian support for the Russian defense industrial base, expanding its ability to engage in conflict with Ukraine, which is supplied by Western forces. Iran, on the other hand, sees its alliance with Russia as a way to expand its influence in international organizations, the Middle East, and forming a bloc of revisionist states to counterbalance Western power. Military cooperation, therefore, is just a fraction of what Iran seeks in this relationship, and their interest goes far beyond military support. Thank you all, I hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share the video with everyone you know, to help the World Geopolitics channel keep growing. It may seem like a small thing, but your support by sharing it has helped us until today. Hugs and see you in the next video. Bye. Today. Hugs and see you in the next video. Bye.